welcome back to Avery After Dark. I'm your host, Avery Ross. This is episode 3, and it's a big one. But first, let's make sure that you are subscribed to my channel. Duh. So I did a TikTok story on stalking and abusive relationships a couple weeks ago, and I posted a photo of O.J. Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson in reference to what can happen when people aren't reprimanded in these kinds of situations. But I got quite a few comments asking, who are those people in the photo? And I thought, all right, I have to cover this. This is a 90s case, so it'll be really interesting for younger listeners, as well as a good refresher for people who lived through the craziness. Today, we're talking about the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman in the trial of O.J. Simpson. This is one of the most highly publicized cases in history because of who O.J. Simpson was and how all of this went down. Orenthal James Simpson was born on July 9th, 1947 in San Francisco, California. He was a football running back and nicknamed the Juice. He played for USC, so that made him very popular in LA. He went on to the NFL and played for the Buffalo Bills for 11 seasons and the San Francisco 49ers. He won the Heisman Trophy in 1968. After retiring, O.J. went into sports broadcasting, acting in films such as The Naked Gun, and became an advertising spokesperson, most notably for Hertz rental cars. O.J. was really beloved by the public, and he was also liked everywhere. TV, film, commercials. O.J. was a household name. One day in 1977 in Los Angeles, California, O.J. walked into an upscale Hollywood club called the Daisy. There, he meets Nicole Brown, who was working as a hostess. Nicole was born May 19, 1959 in Frankfurt, Germany. Her family moved to the U.S. and she went to high school in Dana Point, California. She had sisters and was a very beautiful, stereotypical California girl. She moved to LA and roomed with a male friend from high school and was working at the Daisy. It was supposedly love at first sight between them. O.J. came back to the club time after time to see her and win her over. But they had a bit of an age difference. O.J. was 30 and Nicole was only 18. And there's also another huge note. O.J. was married with 2 young children, and his wife, at the time Marguerite, was pregnant with their 3rd child. At this point, O.J. was a multimillionaire and famous. He was a star in Hollywood, but his football career was ending. So there was an imbalance of power from the start between the two. On their dates, he would pick her up in his black Rolls Royce that's license plate said Juice. And after one of their dates, Nicole came home and her roommate noticed that her pants were ripped. He asked Nicole what happened and she said, "Oh, well, O.J. got a little forceful." The roommate was upset, but she said, "No, it's okay. I really like him." Shortly after that, O.J. told Nicole that she needed to move out of her apartment that she shared with a male friend, and the jealousy was rearing its head. He got her another apartment to live in, and her friends noticed O.J. was becoming a little more possessive. The two continued to date, and after a 3-year affair with Nicole, O.J. finally divorced his wife. He married Nicole in February 1985 in a ceremony at his $5 million Rockingham Brentwood mansion. She moved in, and by 1988, they had 2 children. O.J. and Nicole lived a very luxurious life. Hollywood events, charity galas, extravagant trips, and his and her Ferraris. It looked like from the outside to be the perfect marriage. But behind closed doors, Nicole was seeing O.J.'s dark side, and it was out of control. O.J. had extreme jealousy issues and would become enraged. He smashed in the window to their Mercedes during one of their fights, and it started getting physical. In the early hours of New Year's Day, 1989, police arrived at O.J.'s mansion on a domestic disturbance call. As they pulled up, they see Nicole running out of the bushes, half-dressed and screaming, telling the cops that O.J. was trying to kill her. O.J. was arrested and charged with assault and pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor. He was told to seek counseling, but that ended up being a joke and not even a slap on the wrist for Simpson, as he had a friend who did counseling work. They did 2 to 3 phone calls, and that was it. Many people know Nicole and OJ through their friendships with Kris Jenner and Robert Kardashian. They were all close friends, and the Kardashians and the Simpsons would go on vacations together. Kim Kardashian herself even said they called him Uncle OJ. Nicole reportedly told many friends that OJ Simpson told her that he would one day kill her and get away with it. But as worried as friends were, Nicole was in a pretty deep cycle of abuse. OJ would abuse her, then he'd apologize. Nicole would forgive him, and the pattern would repeat. Round and round they went for years. She did start wisening up about the legal system and was taking photos of her bruises and cuts from OJ and storing these photos in her safe deposit box. She was also writing down the dates of the abuse in her diary and was hoping this may lead to her getting custody of the children when the two would divorce. And sure enough, in 1992, after 7 years of marriage, Nicole was done. She divorced OJ Simpson. It looked like she had finally had enough of the abuse. It was at this point that Nicole really felt like she could start fresh after the divorce. Her friends and family said she was really coming into her own. She's able to socialize and meet new people, and the alimony from the divorce helped her live independently. She moved out of OJ's mansion and rented a house after the split. She was awarded almost a $500,000 settlement, as well as $10,000 a month for child support. She also kept the Ferrari. OJ Simpson had a new girlfriend, and Nicole was dating casually, but OJ didn't approve of this lifestyle for Nicole, and as the cycle of violence goes, Nicole continued to see OJ after the split. The two of them seemed to share a mutual obsession with each other, and his abuse continued. On October 25th, 1993, OJ's dark side was caught on tape when Nicole called 911 during a violent dispute. OJ had come over to Nicole's house while the kids were upstairs sleeping, and Nicole got scared and called the police for help. This is a clip of that 911 call.
911 emergency.
Can you get someone over here now to 325 Gretna Green? He's back. Please.
Well, okay, what does he look like?
He's O.J. Simpson. I think you know his record. Could you just send somebody over here?
Okay, what is he doing there?
He just drove up again.
He just drove up.
Over.
Okay, wait a minute. What kind of car is he in?
He's in a white Bronco, but first of all, he broke the back door down to get in.
Okay, wait a minute. What's your name?
Nicole Simpson.
Okay, is he the sportscaster or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Wait a minute. We're sending the police. What is he doing? Is he threatening you?
I'm going nuts.
Okay, has he threatened you in any way, or?
What?
What does he say? Calling unit, your domestic violence at 30 Correction 325 South Gretna Green Way is now too high. The suspect is now entered in the jail house, and it is refusing to leave. It's code too high. Incident 4221 RD 825. Children involved. Just stay on the line, okay? Is he upset with something that you did?
Oh, a long time ago. It always comes back.
That call is haunting, and listening to it, I genuinely just feel so sorry for her. 5 days before Nicole's murder, a worker at a women's shelter received a call from a woman who only identified herself as Nicole. She told the woman at the shelter that she was afraid for her life. It was never confirmed that this was Nicole, as she wasn't alive to answer, but many believe that this was Nicole Brown calling for help in her final days. O.J. Simpson was treated much differently because of his celebrity status by the police and by the public. The LAPD would often brush off these disputes and calls because he was the juice. Nicole Brown Simpson was really in an awful position. Nicole's 35 at this point, and she had moved into a townhouse at 875 South Bundy Drive in Brentwood, Los Angeles, and was living there for a year with the two kids. She put most of her energy towards her family, and many said that her kids were her life. But 2 years into her divorce with OJ, and she was still being abused by him. On Sunday, June 12, 1994, OJ was supposed to fly to Chicago that night to host a celebrity golf tournament for Hertz. Earlier that day, a waitress at his country club heard OJ in a screaming match with Nicole on the phone. In recent days, OJ had threatened to report Nicole to the IRS for not disclosing the sale of a property. This would have forced Nicole to move out of her house on Bundy to avoid a large tax payment. Nicole and OJ attended their daughter's dance recital that afternoon. Nicole sat with her mom and sisters, and OJ came in shortly after and sat behind them. Nicole reportedly flat out ignored OJ at the recital, refusing to acknowledge that he was even there. Nicole's therapist, Dr. Susan Forward, said he was rejected at the recital. You can't reject an obsessor. That's when any demons they have really kick in. After the recital, Nicole and her family went to Mezzaluna for dinner, a restaurant Nicole frequented a lot. 25-year-old waiter Ron Goldman, who was an aspiring actor, chatted and welcomed Nicole with her family. Ron Goldman, born July 2, 1968, was working as a waiter at the time and had dreams of becoming an actor. He was really loved by his family and was just said to be a nice guy. He was only 25 and just starting his life, really. As they were leaving, Nicole's mom unknowingly dropped her glasses. Nicole and the kids went back home to her townhouse for the night. Once there, Nicole's mom called her asking if she could get the glasses back. Nicole then called the restaurant and her friend Ron, and he said the glasses were found and offered to drop them off when he got off work. Ron and Nicole were reportedly just friends, and new ones at that. The two had just met 6 weeks earlier. A co-worker of Ron's said that she wouldn't have been surprised if Ron wanted it to be more than that, but there was no indication that it was anything but a friendship. Nicole then runs a bath for herself at home, lights candles, and Ron Goldman leaves work, changes, and then drives to Nicole's with the glasses. At 10:30 p.m., a couple walked past Nicole's residence and didn't notice anything or hear anything. But 10 minutes later, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were brutally attacked by a killer. The two were fatally stabbed and left on the front porch of Nicole's townhouse. Nicole was found laying in the fetal position. This crime scene was absolutely horrific. Around midnight, Nicole's dog, an Akita, was loose on the street, its feet covered in blood. Nicole's neighbor followed the dog, who was extremely agitated, to Nicole's front porch, where they came across a gruesome scene, and 911 is called. Police arrive at the scene and determine that this was a rage killing. There was no robbery, no drugs. Next to Ron Goldman, police found a blue knit cap, a left-hand extra-large leather glove, and the envelope containing the glasses that he was returning for Nicole's mom. Nicole's injuries were extremely personal, and she had defensive wounds on her hands. Police found a trail of the assailant's bloody shoe prints through the back gate. To the left of some of the prints were drops of blood from the assailant, who was apparently bleeding from the left hand. Measuring the distance between the prints indicated that the assailant walked rather than ran away from the crime scene. Police went to Simpson's residence to notify him about Nicole and noted that when they pulled up, Simpson's Bronco was parked at an awkward angle and there was blood on the door. The police feared that Simpson may be hurt as well. Maybe an assailant attacked them both. So they hopped the fence and detectives entered. They got to the property and Simpson wasn't there, but they found his house guest, a friend of OJ's named Cato Kalin, who was staying in OJ's guest house. He stated he heard thumps on his wall earlier in the night. Detective Furman found a blood-stained right-hand glove that matched the glove found at the scene on OJ's property. OJ was contacted by police the following morning in Chicago. On the phone, they noted that Simpson sounded very upset but was weirdly unconcerned with the circumstances of how Nicole died. And Simpson only asked if the children had seen Nicole's body, but didn't ask if the assailant hurt the children. OJ got on the next flight back to LA. Once back in LA, they interview OJ and ask him where he was on the night Nicole and Ron were murdered, and OJ tells them that he went out for some burgers with Cato and then came home, and then headed to the airport where he caught his flight to Chicago. When talking to OJ, Detective Lang noticed that Simpson had a cut on his finger on his left hand that was consistent with where the killer was bleeding from, and asked him how he got the cut. At first, OJ claimed that he cut his finger accidentally while in Chicago after learning of Nicole's death, because he was just so upset. Lang then informed Simpson about the blood that was found on his car. At this point, Simpson changes his story and said he actually cut his finger on June 12th, but said he didn't remember how. Through witness testimony and phone records, this is what we can gather in regards to OJ's movements the night of the murders. OJ and Kato Kalin, the house guest, went out to get burgers in Simpson's Bentley. He calls his girlfriend around 10 p.m. and she doesn't answer. At 10:20 p.m., a limo driver arrived to OJ's residence to take him to the airport for his trip to Chicago, but the driver couldn't reach anyone on the intercom at OJ's house. It looked like there was no one home, and he didn't see OJ's Bronco on the street as he pulled up. So he waited and waited. After sitting for a while, he saw a shadowy figure of a man walk across the property in the dark towards the house. He thinks, oh, that looks like OJ. Let me try to call the intercom again. And OJ answers. He says he's running behind and that he'll be down soon. OJ gets back to the car around 11 p.m. They load up OJ's bags in the back, and there's one small bag that OJ will not allow anyone to touch. He holds it and brings it into the car with him. OJ's driver told police that during their drive to the airport, OJ complained of how hot it was and seemed to be sweating. Despite it being a cooler night in LA, the driver noted that this was odd. Another witness at the airport said they saw OJ unloading items from that small bag into a trash can at the airport. The police interview countless witnesses and also find more blood inside OJ's Bronco. That, along with the matching glove from the crime scene that they found at OJ's, sealed the deal for police. This evidence was determined to be probable cause to issue an arrest warrant for Simpson. After Nicole's funeral, OJ was charged with the double murder. The next day, despite agreeing to turn himself in to the LAPD, Simpson failed to surrender. In an attempt to avoid being arrested, OJ wrote a dramatic note and then took off with his friend AC Cowlings in AC's white Ford Bronco, and the low-speed police chase seen around the world began. And when I tell you that everyone watched, I mean everyone watched. TV channels aired the police chase live, and people everywhere watched in complete shock. This was O.J. Simpson, the Juice, on the run from the police for the world to watch. It's estimated that 95 million people tuned in. Simpson held a gun to his head and after hours finally turned himself in. O.J. was taken into custody and with his wealth hired a team of attorneys to defend him. They would be known by the media and the public as the Dream Team. The team included Robert Shapiro, Johnny Cochran, Robert Kardashian, and many other high-profile attorneys. The 11-month trial was televised and exposed OJ as a wife-beater. Nicole's 911 calls, photographs, and diaries of abuse hit hard for a lot of people. It painted a picture of a horrible, abusive relationship. The prosecution's theory was that OJ went out for burgers with Kato to establish an alibi. He then went to Nicole's house with a knife with the intention of killing her. During a reconstruction of the murders, police believe that Ron Goldman arrived during or shortly after Nicole's murder. The prosecution's theory was that OJ had plenty of time to kill Nicole and Ron, get home, run across the yard, which the driver witnessed, and then get to the airport. I feel that the prosecution had so much evidence against OJ. They found hairs consistent with OJ's on the cap found at the crime scene. The blood dropped from the killer at Bundy was the same type as Simpson's, and Simpson had fresh cuts on his left hand the day after the murder. All three's blood, all found in the Bronco. Blood on socks found at OJ's house matched Nicole's blood. Shoe prints at Bundy were size 12, and OJ wore a size 12 shoe. The knife that was used that night has never been found, but infamously, the prosecution asked OJ to try on the bloody glove found, and it didn't fit. Johnny Cochran iconically said,
"If it doesn't fit, you must acquit."
In reality, the glove had been soaked in blood and was frozen and unfrozen to preserve it over the course of the trial. Also, OJ was wearing a latex glove underneath, which would make the glove harder to get on. And also, OJ is an actor. Let's not forget that. OJ's team then accused the LAPD of being racist and mishandling the evidence. Detective Mark Furman was one of the first on the scene and the officer who found the most physical evidence, specifically the bloody glove by OJ's guest house. Mark Furman's past and motives were brought into question. Simpson did not testify at his criminal trial, and in the end, OJ was controversially acquitted and walked out a free man. Both the Browns and the Goldmans were heartbroken. They believed that Ron walked in on OJ killing Nicole and was murdered trying to help. The Goldmans filed a civil suit against OJ and won. As of 2021, OJ has paid close to $133,000, but still owes the family $50 million. It's fairly common knowledge that most people believe that OJ did it. The evidence is stacked against him, specifically the blood evidence. Other suspects have been brought up over the years, but I think we look at OJ's history with Nicole and that answers any questions I have. It's sad to me that police didn't do more to help Nicole throughout the years. I feel they really let her down because of who OJ was and the blinders they had on because of his celebrity status. Recently, OJ said that he didn't like to be in LA because he was always on edge that he could be standing next to Nicole's killer. Give me a break. If you're interested in this case, I suggest you look up a documentary called OJ Made in America, which is a 2016 film on this case. It's incredibly interesting and gives insightful footage, backstories, and interviews of the key players in this case. What are your thoughts on this entire case and trial? I personally am completely disgusted by OJ Simpson and feel that this was a major injustice, but I would love to know your thoughts. If you liked this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel and I'll see you next episode.